Alright guys, welcome back to Valorant News. The bracket for the Valorant World Championship continues in just about a day or so, but Ye has given his response to NRG's collapse out of the tournament. Artis, of course, got clowned on heavily after losing to Bilibili Gaming with the things that he said, but Ye says, look, a lot of the fans, they changed their mind on these things too quickly, but if he was offered the NRG spot to replace Artis, would he necessarily turn it down? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, I thought this was kind of funny, a quick reaction here from PaperX to the bracket, and you know, they basically like, oh, like it's rigged, right? And this is the thing, if they just revealed it live, if they did a live draw show, and I know that they did do something like that recently, a live draw show, I think for the groups of this, right, they did a live draw show, but they didn't do so for the bracket. And look, I'm not complaining about the bracket, we don't have EG Loud, we don't have PRX DRX as we usually do, so I'm happy about that we've avoided those games. But you know, you do always a little bit wonder, right, whether like they could have decided this deliberately, because a lot of the matchups, Loud, Fnatic, EG, EDG, they're a bit too good to be true, and the players often are like, oh, it must be rigged. So when the players are saying it's rigged, then it might show that we might need to change the format and the way it's revealed a little bit more than we presently do. But still, the present bracket is set up to be one of the best playoffs that we've had in a very long time, with any luck. There was also a weird rumor yesterday, or actually a report to be fair, from certain sources, that there's going to be some sort of Valorant film releasing in 2025. Some sort of animation made in China by Tencent, maybe not a massive surprise, and there'll be a trailer like roughly this time next year, and then the film will release in 2025. So we'll see about that. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I wonder if they'll get any players involved or any stories involved, or whether it would just be straight up animated. But it's an interesting idea, and I don't know if it's going to be any good, but I guess we'll see on that. There was also the discussion and the reveal from the VCT officially of the Challengers update format that we discussed briefly yesterday. And as Josh RT says here from the Guard, there's definitely some welcome changes here. The year-round Tier 2 calendar and the Tier 3 Premier system are kind of helping promote people up to Tier 2. I think this is a good move. The other piece, though, is this whole Academy thing, and there was some further discussion on this between George Guedes, you know, Josh RT from the Guard, and also Vanity, discussing how if you're G2, for example, you're a team that presumably will be still there next season in Challengers and will probably return. There's now an arrangement where they could partner themselves with a Tier 1 team, and that Tier 1 team would, in the Partnership League, would be funding their players potentially on their Tier 2 roster, at least part of those players, but then they would have the freedom to call those players up at any point to their starting team, which would, I don't know if Tier 1 teams, this might make sense. If they've got the money to do it, you can effectively, instead of paying your substitute to just sit on the bench and do nothing, you can pay your substitute to actually play on a Tier 2 roster like G2 or like any other Tier 2 roster. But if you want him to be brought up to the starting team for your partnered team, you can do exactly that. So I think it will be nice for the Tier 1 teams if they can find a, you know, Tier 2 team to do this with. But if you're a Challenger team with aspirations to win Ascension, you probably don't want these relationships. If you're M80, you probably don't want Sentinels being able to just take your best player if they want to make a roster change. Like, you know, so it's obviously a mutual agreement between the teams if they want to agree to this. But, you know, I don't know how many teams will actually go in for it if they really intend to win champions. If you're a team like DSG, that is probably going to put together a roster which isn't exactly expected to win Ascension, is what I meant to say, sorry, not champions. That'd be a little bit ambitious for a Tier 2 roster. But if you're DSG, maybe that relationship makes sense. So tweet your thoughts in the comment section below. There was also some discussion here, as Leaf says, I'm going to start posting random scrim scores that are completely fake for impressions. Zell says, I'm going to start leaking rosters at this point. Does make me wonder, how far along are any roster discussions as it stands? Because I would not be surprised if many teams, and Cloud9 could well be in a similar position, have some solid plan as to what they want to do here in Rostermania. The issue is that until Champs is over, you just don't really know. Like, let's say EG bomb out of Champs, top 8, losing to like both Chinese teams, embarrassing stuff, they don't even win a round. Will they keep their roster? Probably not, right? They're probably going to look for some upgrades and some changes there. So, and then of course, if people are available, then teams have to change their mind. So you never really know until the tourney is over. And of course, Loud as well, if they win champions, they might stick it out. But if they don't win champions and Aspas is available and they're making moves, then Sentinels have to think about what they do. And there's all sorts of options. But I'm sure that some teams have a good idea what their plan is going to be once champions is over in terms of what changes they want to make. But they they can't do things too early. So if teams already have made their mind up, they might miss opportunities when Champions is over and players become free agents. Before we get into Champions, wanted to show you guys the viewership numbers for the Champions group stage. And it's actually outrageous. Now, you guys have probably noticed, as far as I'm concerned, that Taric just is the mainstream. Whenever I put a clip in of the video of a highlight moments, it's always from Taric's stream rather than from the main Valorant stream. And to be fair, I think this actually is going to be an issue for Valorant at some point. The fact that they are so reliant on Taric. And I know that people would say that, oh, well, if Taric didn't stream, 90% of those viewers would go and watch the main stream, which is... I don't know if the number is that high, necessarily. I think there's a lot of fans that just watch because it's Taric's stream. And his challenges viewership does incredibly as well. I don't know if it's as simple as, like, all of this viewership would go to the Valorant mainstream if Taric wasn't there. I think that there was a lot of it that resides on him actually streaming it. And I think it's, you know, it's good for Valorant and it's bad for Valorant. Because I think the product is getting pretty reliant on the success of the co-streaming, and Taric is definitely getting a lot of leverage in any potential discussions to be had there. But also there was talk about the viewership itself. And this season is the lowest championship viewership by quite some way, to be fair. Now, 2021, I will say, when the pandemic was going on and everything was still kind of indoors, the viewership bump was pretty mega for esports in general, so I think that can kind of explain a bit of why 2021 is higher than we currently have. But if you look at, like, peak viewership, last year was 860 at this point, this year about 714, and average viewership quite significantly down as well on last year. What are the reasons for that? It's difficult to say because, okay, Loud last year, they won the whole thing. They generally bring in the biggest audience in terms of viewership, but, you know, it's not like last year. You can say, okay, there's no Sentinels, there's no 100 Thieves for the Americas this season, and you can say, yes, sure, but last year there was no Sentinels at Champions either. I do think that time zones do play a role here because it's in LA. It's really difficult for a lot of people in Europe to actually watch, and especially people in Asia to watch, and I think that is probably a big part of it. But there has also been some statistics that have said that the English-speaking viewership has actually gone down quite significantly over the last few months, and I don't know whether that's because the game just isn't as good to watch as it used to be. I think, to be honest, I would agree with that perspective. I have a harder time watching and enjoying the game now than I did, like, let's say 12 months ago when the game was a little bit more simple. There was a little bit less chaos going on. I don't know. That's just my perspective. Maybe you guys disagree on that one. But regardless of various potential reasons, the viewership is down, you know, roughly 20% year on year. So we'll see what happens for the playoffs themselves, for the World Championship Grand Final. But before we get into that, one team that didn't make it is, of course, NRG. And these guys looked understandably devastated after their defeat yesterday to Bilibili Gaming, after all the trash that Artis, especially with this, like, 1,000-yard stay here and talked, and yeah, they collapse out of the tournament pretty emphatically, to be honest. Now, Ye gives his thoughts on this in a since deleted tweet, I thought, which is a little bit interesting because I tried to find this tweet this morning, but it seemingly does no longer exist. PSA to fellow pros: one bad month of results, regardless of situation or context, will replace 3 years of results or achievements in the eyes of the community. You just can't win. And I think Ye's experienced this firsthand. He, until just a couple of days ago, still had the most ever kills, especially from, like, an North American player in international events. And he was only overtaken, I think, by Victor very recently this past weekend. And, you know, so Ye, but he's, of course, the tune on Ye has changed somewhat since he's gone to DSG and had a very difficult time. And that is how it is, you know, people want to know what players are like now. You know, you're only as good in the eyes of the community as your most recent result. And you could have dominated for years, a few bad months, and people will, at least in the community, start to think, oh, these guys are washed, or this guy is washed. The players might not always think in that way, but the fans quite often, you know, recency bias is a thing, and sometimes it's a thing for good reason. But I think Ye is probably trying to defend Artis in some respect and trying to defend NRG's situation in general. He's also saying that, like, he's experienced this. Ye's stock is not now what it was previously, but it still is pretty high. And on the NRG perspective, you know, they can play very well for several years, right? That entire core, FNS, Crashies, Victor, let's say, and they play bad for a little while, and now, you know, people like our NRG are washed, they've got to make moves. But still, they didn't play great, did they? You know, if they stick it out for next season, I don't think that'll be the correct decision. So I think he's kind of looking at the way that things have gone with Artis, and Artis has been great for some time, has a couple of, you know, difficult match really here against Bilibili Gaming, and all of a sudden people want his head really on a stick, and they want Ye in instead. And also that is the question as far as I'm concerned. Would Ye coming in for Ardis actually improve this team? I think it might improve the team. Would it fix the team? I don't know if that's the case at all. I don't know if that core three of NRG with, Finesse and Crashies and Victor are quite what they were previously. And, okay, maybe that's recency bias on my part. But at some point, players do, in certain metas, the way things develop over time just aren't quite as impactful. And if you bring Ye back in with Marved back in, do they just become Optic again? I don't know if they do, because the meta, Chamber isn't so viable nowadays, so I don't know what NRG should do. I think they should consider bringing Ye back for Ardis, for sure. Is it necessarily the right move? It's somewhat difficult to say. And even Billy I thought was crazy. This is attack round win percentage, had 60% round wins. A lot of those were against NRG, of course. Fnatic dominated on the attacking round win percentage and on the defensive round win percentage, but these are some numbers here going into the final part of the season, really. Now, this also, just to speak on the meta a little bit more, when Ye and Chamber and Optic were dominating, and of course Ye's good on the Jet as well, as is Ardis, but, it hasn't been quite the same as of late. Chamber is getting used a little bit more now. We're not seeing anything crazy. There were 2 agents that weren't used at all in the group stage, one of which being the brand new Deadlock, of course, and then Reyna as well. Unfortunately, no Reyna getting utilized here, but these were the numbers just out of interest to see during, I'm pretty sure this is the entirety of the group stages over all of these teams. The most picked agent was Killjoy on the majority of maps apart from Binds. We then see Viper, Sky, Raze, Jet is up here, Omen is up here, and then on the lower side, Cypher 8% of the time, Harbor 11%, Chamber 10%, which is, I'm pretty sure during the LCQs in certain regions, Chamber was at like 8%, and now he's at like 10%. So you are seeing some teams use Chamber a little bit more than it was previously the case, and I could see Chamber potentially coming slightly more back into the meta over time, which might favor Ye, but as I say, he can defend NRG from the community for how things have gone, but if they come knocking on Ye's door and say, hey, do you want to return? I don't think he's exactly going to say no, if that's his best offer in the franchise league, because I think he might have quite a couple, to be fair. Just before we close up, wanted to mention the bracket predictions here from Sideshow. This was his overall bracket prediction, the one that is probably the most sensible, with Fnatic winning it, PaperX second, Evil Geniuses third. He's got Loud going out to DRX again here. So this is his, theoretical, sensible bracket. This is his kind of just crazy bracket, taking the opposite victories in all of the games, when FUT Esports has taken the victory over Bilibili Gaming in the grand finals. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.